As you know, that the 11th nuclear non-proliferation treaty review conference is taking place from 27th April to 22 May at the United Nations headquarters in New York. As per the treaty, Article 8, the review conference is mandated to take place every 5 years, convening the state parties, observer states, intergovernmental and civil society organizations to assess the treaty's implementation process. This year's review conference follows the two previous failed review conferences, 2015 and 2022, as we know that neither of these two conferences produce a consensus-based final document. This year's review conference is taking place at a very crucial time when the world seems more fragmented and disordered, and the multilateral system seems deeply fractured. So wars, as we know, are being legitimized in search of a notion of victory, and armament is increasing while discussions on disarmament and non-proliferation are waning. New technologies have taken a role in the battlefield, and states' territorial boundaries are disrespected, and the UN Charter is dishonored. Nuclear weapons are being seen nowadays widely as a toolkit to safeguard national security against foreign invasions. In this backdrop, the prospects surrounding the Review Conference 2026 suggest that negotiations this year will be potentially, in my view, challenging, and without a consensus, the event may culminate in another failure to reach an agreed upon outcomes. So the challenges facing the treaty with with dim prospects ahead are clearly predictable. The diplomatic environment going into the conference is widely described as tense and fragmented. The disagreements over the ongoing Russian war on Ukraine and its effects on Ukrainian nuclear energy infrastructure, disagreements over the war on Iran and its nuclear program, the management of its enriched uranium and verification processes, the attack of the states on other states' nuclear facilities, and the safety of nuclear material amid civil unrest will remain one of the dominating agenda on the forum. So concerns from the U.S. and some allies about China's about some allies of the U.S. about China's buildup of strategic nuclear forces. Criticism of the forward deployment of U.S. tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, and Russia's decision to deploy some of its nuclear weapons in Belarus, and failure of the 5 NPT, nuclear weapons states to engage in negotiations on disarmament will again, I would say, would be a subsequently dominating discussion on the forum today onwards. Already deeply politically divided, environment between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states will further grow deeper during this review conference. The ongoing geopolitical rivalry and great power competition between the US, Russia, and China, and the divisions between NATO and others have already highlighted sharp disagreements and mistrust over nuclear policies and transparency. So these competing trends seem to become a stumbling block for cooperation and shared understanding on the ongoing review conference forum. Recently, the US President Donald Trump warned the world to resume nuclear testing on an equal basis. The demise of the 2010 new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty has lifted further barriers for the US and Russia to upgrade and increase their strategic nuclear arsenal for the first time in decades. So in response to concerns about Russian aggression and the US shrinking cushion for European security, France has also announced that it will increase the size of its arsenals and work closely with certain European partners to increase cooperation on nuclear deterrence. The arms control crisis is a major blow to the NPT treaty, and this year's review conference would surround around this, that the intensity of the contemporary security situation and the growing conventional asymmetries in certain conflicting regions such as Asia-Pacific, South Asia, the Middle Eastern region, the Korean Peninsula, and Eastern Europe will keep a stark security dilemma-driven arms racing problem that will impact between the states. So this concentration has increased states' reliance on deterrence force modernizations while decreasing their emphasis on nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. The advent of new technologies such as biotechnology, quantum computing, nuclear hypersonic weapons, including hypersonic glided vehicles, hypersonic cruise missiles, global prompt strikes, dominance in space, anti-satellite systems, surveillance, cyber warfare tools, high-energy lasers, and artificial intelligence-led drones and lethal autonomous weapons, along with blurring of distinction between low-yield weapons and high-precision advanced conventional munitions, have lowered the threshold for use of nuclear weapons, thereby introducing enormous challenges for the review conference taking place in New York. So there is an evident widening gap between the NPT and new technologies. The leading technology holders sitting on the review conference forum are not willing at all to deliberate on any framework for the regulations of the new technologies. Resultantly, the nuclear possessor states that are competing against regional adversaries in turn become more resistant to the idea of giving up their nuclear options to hedge against the emerging technologies. So new technologies propose a decisive conventional edge to the holders of these technologies. This in turn implies more reliance on nuclear weapons by those lacking such technologies. So further discussion, in my understanding, would surround the humanitarian approaches to disarmament, which have further divided rather than united the international community on nuclear disarmament. This means the civil society and states-sponsored disarmament advocates of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which is called TPNW, have based their idea on the humanitarian impact, but they potentially fail to build the interface of the new technologies or advanced technologies for nuclear weapons policies and doctrines. The TPNW, to me, was perceived by the civil society groups and the public alike as a major leap forward to a world without nuclear weapons. Although this treaty will create irreconcilable political cleavages between those who advocate it and those who had a monopoly on nuclear weapons. The TPNW, in my view, may not have the power to bridge the divide between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states without integrating debates on emerging technologies and emerging regional tensions and security considerations of the states facing problems at the regional level. The rise of the TPNW reflects frustration within the NPT system and framework. In a nutshell, the NPT process is trying to function while its supporting system is deteriorating and the treaty is gradually becoming irrelevant to the current realities. So it goes without saying that, of course, NPT still remains a highly relevant, legitimate forum for critically reviewing the treaty's efficacy and, of course, negotiations, further negotiations, etc. But despite its challenges, NPT still, I would say, garners global momentum and normative spirit towards its goals. Historically, the NPT review process has adopted format consensus documents such as chair statements or potential agreements to maintain progress. This year's review conference is a pivotal moment amid the ongoing political crisis. Given the current international environment and the inability of the preparatory committee to make recommendations for the conference to consider the ability of the 2026 review conference to agree on a final document is acknowledged as a challenge. There is a need to revise, in my view, the core power structure inside the NPT to embrace new and emerging technologies and new realities. There is a need to reestablish an arms control regime to build renewed momentum towards non-proliferation. There is a need to bridge the gap between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states by creating a balance between state security needs and disarmament. Moreover, at every step of the disarmament process, it has to be ensured that no state or a group of states acquire a military advantage over the others, and that equal and undiminished security for all states has to be guaranteed. So the norms against nuclear weapons is not likely to lead to a practical ban on nuclear weapons until certain new conditions are set and a new security environment is created to address states' disparities and differences. Thus, without serious and meaningful work, in my view, within the broader UN system for a proactive security mechanism, which proves guarantees for states against, arbitrary actions by militarily powerful states, it will not be easy to convince states to give up nuclear weapons. For that purpose, revival of, in my view, the Conference on Disarmament to negotiate nuclear disarmament as a part of a comprehensive program of work which provides for simultaneous efforts to address non-nuclear military asymmetries, militarization of AI, and prevention of arms race in the outer space by using the framework offered by the SSD1 long ago, I think will assist in the creation of a new spirit in the NPT. And I thank you all for your attention, and I'm open to take question and answer sessions in the interactive session.